What is up, everybody? Ethan Newberry, the Ginger Runner, here for another Ginger Runner Live, episode number 88. We are getting up there in numbers, and tonight's episode I'm super stoked on because my guest is a legend in ultra running. He's been running ultras for a long time now, and not just small ones, but big ones, 100-milers, the most recent of which, UTMF. Sounds like it was quite the experience, and I can't wait to hear all about it on tonight's Ginger Runner Live. So stand by. Here we go, everybody. Let's do this. Ginger Runner. Yes, welcome to the show, Ginger Runner Live, and tonight's guest, Jeff Browning, is already here, ready to talk to us. Jeff, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm again, like I mentioned just before the show there, I am super stoked to have you on. I want to pick your brain about a lot of things ultra running, a lot of things racing. Do you know your total count of ultras at this point? Because I know Ultra Sign Up cheats and it doesn't list all of them. I know it's a much greater number than what's listed there.
Somewhere around 100. It's 2200s, but I don't know how many exactly. I lost count in the 80s, and I know I'm getting around 100. I've been meaning to count them all up, but it's when you go back 15 years, you start forgetting, like, oh, I don't remember how many times I ran Where's Waldo and that kind of stuff. So
yeah, you begin to lose the count on the hands because it exceeds the 10 digits. You started in 2000.
And when you're old, you start losing your memory too, I think.
2001, right? Was that the first ultra?
Yep. Hag Lake 50K.
So you remember that one? That one's like the first one.
I do.
What brought you into the ultra world?
Say that again. What was that? Sorry. Every once in a while we get a little cut out.
No problem. What brought you into the ultra world?
I was a mountain biker, and a good buddy of mine, Rod Bean, kind of got me into him. He just kind of introduced me to Western States 100, and I decided that I probably wanted to run 100, and then found out I'm very impatient, and then I found out you had to qualify and run a 50-miler, and so in the year and a half getting ready for that race, getting in the lottery, getting in the race, training for it, doing other ultras. I think I did maybe 5 ultras before I did Western States in 2002. Mm-hmm. I got kind of hooked on the sport and been doing it ever since. Kind of took over my mountain biking bug.
One thing I know I'm going to want to talk to you about at some point during tonight, we don't have to answer it right now, but at least to get your brain going, is longevity in the sport. I've had other guests on the show who have been running a long time as well. 15 years for you, over 100 ultras, 2,200 miles, 100-mile races as well, which is, it's nuts. As someone I'm relatively new to the sport, only been doing it for a couple of years now. I want to be able to do it as long as you have, and I'm sure as long as you're going to be doing it. And so I think longevity is going to be a question that I'm going to have probably later in the show.
Sure.
But I definitely want to start talking about some of your races. What spawned this addiction to ultra, in a sense, where you are racing fairly often and at a fairly high level too? Did you find yourself competing at a fairly high level early on, or did you develop?
No, the first couple of years were just finishing them. I was probably in the top back then when it wasn't super competitive. I was maybe in the top 20-30% when I was finishing. I just was trying to run them and finish them and learn something about it. And then, after 2003 or 4, I started thinking about racing a little bit. I got 6th at Wasatch in 04, my second 100, and I almost got 5th. And so that's when I started thinking, well, I've run 2 solid 100s that, it's supposed to be really hard to go under 24 hours at Wasatch, and I did it my first try there. So for me, that's when I started saying, well, maybe I need to concentrate on hundreds, and that's when I really started to think about racing hundreds.
Do you have a preference, technical hundreds versus single track, buffed, fast, downhill hundreds? Is there something that rings Jeff Browning's bell?
Wild. I like wild courses, or fairly wild courses, technical courses, Bighorn 100, let's see, comes to mind, Hard Rock 100.
Oh, yeah.
the race in Chile was probably the wildest race I've ever done. It might be a little too on the wild side for some people, but it's a solid race. So, if you come with an adventurous spirit and know how to take care of yourself. But, I definitely like wilder courses and harder courses for sure, mountain courses.
Ultra Fjord, right?
Yes, Ultra Fjord.
Yeah, we had Nikki Kimball on the show talking about her experience there as well, and it sounded like it was quite the year, quite the event down there.
Yeah, I had a little different. I think I had a little different experience than Nikki did, but mine was a little more positive, and definitely I wasn't quite as freaked out and scared about it, But I had been to Patagonia before, and I knew it was I just knew that the attitude down there they're a little tougher down there, and
yeah,
it's a little more remote. So I came there with the right frame of mind too, I think.
I want to remind everyone who is watching live that if you are in the chat room, ask a question, or better yet, if you are on Twitter, all you have to do is use the hashtag #GRLive, and I can bring your question up on screen and ask Jeff that way. That's probably the easiest way because the chat room tends to move pretty fast. There was a question back here, Jeff, for you. I want to go back. It was from Gosekins. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. I know I am. Jeff, how many DNFs in your career? I don't think it's many.
One.
Yep. And that was recent, right? That was like a
UTMF or UTMB because of a rolled ankle. I don't DNF unless it's an injury, and that was the first injury I've come across that I've had to DNF. There's been a couple that were borderline. I should have maybe dropped out, but one comes to mind, Cascade Crest in 2010. I banged my shin the day before the race, and it hurt every step, and it was pretty gnarly after the race, but luckily I had no lasting damage. So, but UTMB was really bad. I rolled it all the way over. It popped. I didn't tear anything, but it was definitely, I couldn't run on it. So,
that sounds awful.
Yeah, it kind of sucked.
How many more miles did you run on it? Because I remember hearing via Twitter
50K.
and all that. Jeez. That's amazing.
And then I couldn't run downhill very fast. And then at this point it was just, I just decided I wasn't racing. I was finishing. And then next thing I know, I couldn't even run downhill. So then I was hiking and limping, and my Achilles was swollen. And so was my ankle really bad. And so then I finally decided that I would call it quits so I could concentrate on UTMF.
We've had tough runners on the show before. I have to say, like that, I give you major credit for that, Jeff, because I've had a sprained ankle before. I suffered from it early on this year. I can't imagine running another 50K on that. So my hat, which I'm not wearing tonight, off to you, my friend. And Cascade Crest, that was my very first 100. I just ran it.
Yes.
I did it. It was hard.
That's a great race.
It is awesome. Such an awesome race, but holy crap, that was a hard one. We have a great question here from Twitter. Ultra Runner Pete asks, let's make sure we get this up. Jeff, how do you recover between 100s to race them so frequently? Recently ran my first 100 and recovery is taking forever. I'm actually in that same boat. I don't know if it's something that your body just learns to adapt to over time. What's your secret?
Well, the biggest one is rest right after the race. I don't get too antsy about running again. 10 days off, no running. I just hike every day, walk at lunch and stuff like that for maybe an hour, 45 minutes to an hour, okay. Just to get everything moving again. I do, within a week, start strength training again, and then I'll start running 10 days after the race, and really, really easy, like 3 to 5 milers, nothing hard. And in the early days, though, I couldn't do those back-to-back. I mean, that's taking, I didn't really start running 2 a year until 07. I ran 2 a year, and then started running 2 a year every year, and kind of spread out so I could recover pretty quickly, have time to recover and not feel like forced to run again right after 100. And I did that for probably 3 or 4 or 5 years. And before I I did 4 last year. Tried to do 3 this year, but got dogged at UTMB. But anyway, now I pretty much am trying to do three a year. But But the biggest thing is rest. Like people get too antsy about, oh, I gotta get my mileage in, but
Right.
you have so much base fitness, you don't have to run very much. I usually run, take a couple extra days off once I start running again too, and just then start tapering right back in for the next 100. You don't have to do a ton.
We've had all sorts of schools of thought on the show regarding mileages per week and following certain training regimes and stuff like that. Is there something that you follow? Do you have a coach? Do you go by a certain miles per week, or is it by feel?
Training wise, I'm my own coach. I should be a coach because I give some free coaching occasionally to local people, but I have so much geeky knowledge in my head that I should be sharing it after 15 years. But pretty much I don't really worry about mileage necessarily. I kind of have a routine. It's anywhere from 5 to 12 milers during the week at lunch. Couple of those runs usually involve climbing, some kind of hills, decent amount of hills, at least 1,000 feet of climbing or more, sometimes up to 2,000 feet of climbing in one of those runs. And then couple of quality days, and then a long run, usually long run somewhere big with lots of climbing. That's 3 to 6 hours of running. And that's that's been my routine for years. I don't get caught up in mileage per week very often. Most of the time I'm thinking about how much I'm climbing because I'm doing mountain races. So I think about elevation gain and how much I can sandwich in a week. Like that's what I'm looking at more than I am my mileage. And then making sure I get my strength days in, because I'd rather run an easy 3 miler and do a strength training day once or twice a week than I would go run 10 miles just to get jump miles in. I think the strength training, especially after 40, come into big time into play with both recovery and injury prevention, and just range of motion, working full range of motion, because running we don't work our full range of motion. So and in weight training you do. So I have my own routine I do at home with dumbbells. So it's pretty simple, but it's quick.
Do you utilize any sort of specificity in training when you're going into a super technical race, or a race that has technical sections, or like Hard Rock compared to Western States, two completely different races? Will you train specifically for that race, or do you kind of follow the same plan, which is elevation over miles?
No, I definitely specificity of training. Getting ready for UTMB, UTMF, or UTMB especially this year, or Hard Rock last year. I was climbing 17 to 20,000 feet of climbing a week.
Yeah.
And then and doing hard stuff, and elevation, doing getting ready for altitude, stuff like that. So I'm always doing that kind of stuff. And before UTMF, I did probably 4 in between UTMB and UTMF, which were 4 weeks apart. I did 4 speed work sessions to get ready for the road sections of UTMF, just to be able to run a little faster and comfortable. So yeah, I definitely think about the next race coming up and train specifically for that by mixing in little specificity stuff. But my base is pretty much very similar. I'm always trying to climb. I'm always trying to do some speed work so I don't lose speed. Especially this time of year after hundreds are over, I go back to doing less mileage, less volume, and more fast stuff.
Awesome. Great questions.
I went to the track yesterday.
Oh, really? The track?
Yes.
Do you enjoy those sessions? Because some people don't.
I just ran track in high school, and I specialized in the 800. So for me, I'm used to doing hard intervals, and so there's a little bit of something familiar about the track, doing hard workouts on the track. And I like running fast. I mean, I have to say there's nothing better than like ticking off hard 200s and 400s and 800s. It hurts, but there's something about it that hurts good. So I still like to go do some speed work. I don't go to the track that often. I'll do more stuff on tempo, on trails and pathways. But right now I have a bet, or a gentleman's bet, with some local guys to break 5 minutes on the track end of November in the mile.
Nice. That's a completely different challenge than placing podium at UTMF.
Yeah. So we'll see. I ran a 5:01 in February.
Okay.
In a track workout with some high school kids at St. George, and I was down at Ultraspire visiting the campus, and jumped in with a track workout, and they ran a time trial that day, and I didn't get my third lap split, and I didn't know I was that close to sub 5. And being 44 years old, you start thinking, maybe I can run sub 5 one more time. So I decided that I would try to run it this year. So we'll see.
Do it. Kill it, and keep us updated. Great questions coming in the chat room regarding strength training. That's something that we've mentioned on the show many times. It seems ultra runners love it. They really embrace it, or at least feel it's a huge part of their training regimen. How
Totally.
much of a part of it is it for you? Do you do 1 day a week, 2 days a week, 4 days a week? And how much upper body do you tend to do?
I do 2 days a week most of the time. Sometimes one when I'm in the heat of like summer training and I don't have as much time. But I never skip a week, hardly ever. At least not in the last few years. I'm big on strength training. I kind of came from a strength training background in high school and college and did a lot of that. That was kind of just a pastime outside of mountain biking. So more to just to be buff back then when I was 20 years old and stupid, but I thought that was cool. But you know, I think now, I think it's very important. I definitely would say it's a must if you want to train consistently and not get injured, because you're always losing muscle mass as an ultra runner. You're going to the well, you're breaking into protein and breaking down muscle mass. And so what you're doing is basically getting your percent of body fat is actually going up because your percent of muscle is going down. So if you don't do it, I mean, there were probably the first 4 years of ultra running, I didn't lift at all. And I lost a ton of muscle mass. And I came into the sport being pretty buff. I mean, like probably a little too bulky, you know, was weighing like 155 and now I weigh about 143. So, but I mean, I think, and the same size waist. So like I just was really big and I lost a lot of that over that 5-year span, but then I built back up and I haven't gained that much on my upper body, but I do upper body and lower body together as a whole full body routine twice a week after speed work usually.
That's good knowledge and definitely something that people watching wanted to hear, because a lot of people are also in support of that, especially going on here in the chat room. What is your nutrition background? Tim in the chat room wants to know, are you vegetarian, vegan? Do you count your calories, any of that kind of stuff?
I like meat. I'm not a vegetarian. I do eat very healthy though. I make sure that I grew up on a farm. So I grew up, you know, my grandfather had a big garden. We had fresh vegetables all the time, and we had, you know, we raised our own meat. So, and we hunted, you know, deer in the Midwest. So always had wild meat too, wild game. So that's kind of what I grew up doing. So for me, my wife was a vegetarian for 7 years, had some health issues with it, went back to eating clean meat and vegetables. So mainly we eat vegetables, fruit, and clean meat. So natural chicken, organic chicken. I usually get a quarter of beef for my deep freeze in the fall from a grass-fed, grass-finished, local, regional farm. And then what else? You know, I do carbs, but I do strategic carbs, mainly in the form of rice and potatoes and yams. I don't do a lot. I don't do much pasta, or I do a little bit of sprouted bread at home. I kind of have an 80-20 rule. 80% of the time I eat healthy at home. 20% of the time I don't sweat it. I'll have pizza, burger, French fries. But we have a lot of good options in Bend that are, you know, you can go get a grass-fed burger and not have to be supporting that industry. I don't like to support genetically modified stuff. I saw it kind of ruin a farming industry where I grew up and pollute. And so I'm not big on that industry, so I don't like to support it with my dollars.
That's great insight, for sure. Another good question on Twitter from the Hawk Daddy. This is something that I was actually interested in. I reviewed the Patagonia Everlong. It's a shoe that I loved. It had your signature trademark in it. I was curious what happened to the shoe. Are they going to continue to make shoes Patagonia, or why the switch to Ultra? And I'm going to bring the question.
Patagonia decided to get rid of footwear. That was just a business decision on their part, and they moved on. And I got to make one shoe and get that experience, which was really cool. I feel bad for Luke Nelson because he was starting on the next season on a prototype that he loved, and it was a really good shoe. It would have been the second one in this quiver for Patagonia that would have been a really solid shoe. But he only got like 6 prototypes, and they discontinued footwear, and so be it. So what we do is we move on. So I'd always had Ultras, had always been kind of a closet admirer since they started, and I liked what they were doing. I weaned myself off of custom or hard plastic orthotics to nothing over about 5 years. So I was really big into natural footwear and natural movement, and training your feet to be strong. And so that was a natural connection with Ultra. And when I started talking to them in the middle of the season when they announced that footwear was going away in mid 2014. That's when I started talking to Ultra at Outdoor Retailer in that year, and I ran 100 in their shoes before I said yes.
Yeah.
But I wanted to make sure I liked the shoes, and I could run 100 in them. But I have to say it's been awesome. I have I probably have 3 or 4 pairs, 5 pairs of different models I run in from them. It's nice having so many models for just about anything, whether it's a recovery run, a road run, speed work, all kinds of good stuff from them.
Are you in the Superior, Lone Peak, or Olympus for?
Lone Peak's my technical trail shoe choice. I kind of was on a Paradigm kick for a while until I rolled my ankle at UTMB in them and realized that Maximalist. I went back to a more lower profile shoe because the problem with Maximalist, they're great for recovery and all that kind of stuff, but if you do roll, you roll. You really roll, and you cantilever all the way over. So there's no in between, and so I went back to the Lone Peak, and then the One I love as a great speed work shoe, or a racing road shoe for marathons and under. Super light shoe. And what else? I'll probably run the local cross country race in those tomorrow that Max King puts on. And then what else? I run a little bit in the new Torin's awesome.
Yeah.
I have to say, there's so many good models from them. I mean, they just keep improving and improving and improving, and every model that comes out and every tweak is better. They're really on a roll right now, and it's been fun to be part of that.
You mentioned briefly marathons. In the chat room, a regular viewer of the show just completed his very first marathon. Congratulations, Sam. I want to make sure I give you a shout out.
Nice work.
It's incredible. It's welcome to the club, the Marathon and Beyond Club, man. Congratulations. Great question from Tim on Twitter regarding off season. Now I know Ben deals with a pretty extreme. You have a summer and you have a cold winter. How do you train in the off season?
I do Nordic ski and downhill ski, telemark ski. So I mix in that. I still run base mileage through the winter. We luckily are right on the edge of snow zone for the desert. So we get snow in town, but it usually comes in storms where it'll be on the ground for a little while and then it'll melt. We do get some hard pack freezing and thawing a lot in the shade. So it can be variable conditions. So we end up running in, we stud our shoes here with sheet metal screws. And so pretty much run year round most of the time. I just don't run as big a mileage in the winter, and try to cross train a little with some skiing and occasionally snowshoe. But I have to say my snowshoes gather more dust than they get use. Yeah. I'd rather go out on skis than I would on snowshoes. Snowshoes so slow. Skiing's actually pretty fun, fast. So, and good workout.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of aerobic going on there. I really want to talk about UTMF because this is a race that's been on my radar for a long time. Everyone talks about UTMB. which is this flagship race. I feel like UTMF kind of runs under the radar since it is so close to UTMB, at least in the US. But you were there this last year, a couple weeks ago, actually.
Yeah.
It wasn't that long ago. And Gary Robbins, a good friend of the show, was also there. I want to know what went down in Jeff Browning's camp, because you had quite the race. So kind of lay the land for us. What is your attachment to UTMF? What was your draw there this year? What was the course like this year?
Well, I mean, UTMF, it's only 4 years old, and it's quickly grown to be kind of a pretty big international race, being part of the Skyrunning series or the Ultra Trail World Tour series. Mm-hmm. And I think too, just because Fuji's so iconic, it gained popularity quick. The average American can pronounce it, so I think it got on everybody's radar pretty quickly. For me, I just had always been on my tick list, and so had UTMB since it came out. And so this year I just got an opportunity to go to both. I was doing a couple of retailer events in Tokyo and Yokohama, and just I timed them with the race. And so it just kind of worked out this year. And, blessing in disguise, rolling my ankle and being fresh for UTMF was probably a pretty good deal, just for my personal race. Otherwise, I probably would have been running on pretty beat up legs after UTMB. But, it went well. We had a typhoon come up out of the Philippines. So the tail of the typhoon was over Fuji for the race. Mainly, most of the rain hit the day before the race, and it kind of quit about 3 hours before the race start. Okay. And then it was just kind of misty, and then we'd get isolated stuff. So every once in a while it rained hard. But the good thing was 58, humid, and it was warm rain because it was coming out of the south, right off the ocean. So it wasn't that bad. I mean, I had to run that whole race without my glasses, which, I wear some prescription glasses, so that kind of sucked. But
was that because of the rain?
Yeah, I mean, it was just I couldn't keep the moisture off of them. It was just it was windy kind of up on the ridges and raining in spots, and it was so humid. I was getting condensation on the inside. Oh. And I have like 3 or 4 pairs. Rudy Project's one of my sponsors, so I probably picked the wrong pair. I had picked a really low profile pair, and I have another pair that gets better airflow on when you wear them, so they tend not to fog as quickly. And so I packed what I packed. So it is what it is, and you just kind of have to like roll with it and realize after a while it's like, luckily I can still pass my driver's exam without my glasses. So it's just soft focus.
Okay, so you're not like crawling on the trails with your hands.
No, it's not that bad. It's just not crisp. Like technical terrain was a little, downhills was a little, it takes about an hour for my eyes to adjust again and kind of be okay. Luckily, I figured it out in the daylight, so I could run with blurry eyes for an hour in the daylight. But after a while, you don't even realize you don't have your glasses on anymore. It's just a touch blurry.
Yeah. When you've traveled international a number of times, you've raced all over the globe. When you pack for a race like this, nutrition-wise, what you're going to bring. Do you bring all your own stuff? Do you depend on aid stations? Do you depend on picking stuff up while you're in Japan? What did your packing look like?
I do my own gels and I do my own solid food, so I pretty much skip aid stations except for water. So I had a crew at UTMF, another Patagonia ultra running team from Japan. He's on the Japanese team. He crewed for me, really solid guy. Anyway, gel mixes in flasks, and I just do sushi rolls, which are avocado sushi rolls, just nori, rice, avocado, some sea salt, lemon, a little bit of coconut oil mixed in, and I cut them into rolls and put them in Ziplocs, and that's what I do for solid food every hour, and then do gel flasks. That whole race, that's pretty much all I ate. And
that's normal?
I always do that. So yeah, that's pretty typical. The last year and a half, that's been all I've been doing. works for me. I have to have a little solid food. I can't get by on just gels. But those two things work really well, and they kind of are synergistic together, I feel like. And I do a custom mix of my gels. I do a little extra maltodextrin to cut down the fructose percentage in the gel. So that's my main mixes. Goo I'm working with right now on a new mix, on a possible new Roctane mix that would have a higher maltodextrin count. And I've been testing that since I got back. So hopefully something will come out that's a little more like the exact mix I do.
What is Kimosabi in the chat room also wants to know what's your full-time job, and in this case, I'll dovetail that question. When you travel internationally for a race like this, do you have to take time off of work, or is this your full-time job? Are you able to make it your full-time job so you don't have to worry about traveling so far?
I wish it was my full-time job. I consider it a part-time job. Yeah, I do. A little bit of cash flow comes from trail running, but not very much. Most of it is I have my own graphic design consulting business that I've had since 2001 in Bend. I've been doing it professionally, since '95. So a lot of experience. I've worked for an advertising agency as an art director. Worked as a graphic design director for a tech company for 3.5 years. Like 32 hours a week. So the end of 2014, I went back to freelancing full time just because the scheduling conflicts of me traveling. I've been traveling more the last couple of years for racing. It just wasn't working. I was going into arrears and PTO, and but I still contract for that company part time. So they've been really gracious and worked with my schedule really hard. But going back to freelancing was probably the best thing I could have done. I've always done consulting on the side, even when I had that gig for 32 hours a week. So sometimes I burn the candle at both ends, but now that I'm back to consulting, it seems like a more normalized schedule.
I didn't realize you were a graphic designer, art director. That's how I got my start as well. That's interesting. I'd be totally curious to pick your brain on that at some point.
Yeah, I've been doing that longer than I have, ultra running. So
yeah.
I'm thankful I chased a career before I just got into running, because I definitely have a fallback plan.
That's the same thing. That's awesome. But I want to get back to UTMF before we start going down the path of graphic design and CMYK and all of the glorious elbow and wrist control that art directors tend to have, or clients actually. So tell me a little bit about the race start. I was only able to follow the race online from a very far distance, so just kind of knowing placing of where you are coming into aid stations and stuff like that is fine. Did you start the race really wanting to go for it? I know that you were kind of in the teens, like at 15th, 14th place for the first section. What was kind of your mindset going into these first 40 miles or so?
Well, these races, especially anything with a good international field, they tend to go out fast, especially if there's some European guys in the race. They just like to go out from the gun, like hard and 100. And I don't like to do that. So I just kind of let them go and just run my own pace. I don't think about racing really until I'm halfway through the race. I ran with Gary Robbins part of the time in the 20s, but then he picked up the pace with some other guys. We got into a group of 4 guys, and you could tell there was little egos going on. We were running down a road, and the pace was getting a little faster and a little faster and a little faster. And I was just like, I don't know. I just peeled off and let him go. And it was like, we were in like the 20s still. And I was just like, to be running that pace that early, like where you're not comfortable, is a little stupid in my opinion for 100. So I just tend to approach them as, running comfortably, especially the first 30, 40 miles. And then if you need to make a move here and there, you can. In this one, I even went probably a little extra conservative because I didn't know the course that well. I just knew it on paper and heard it was technical, and the last 3 climbs were tough, and someone told me those last 3 climbs are pretty darn tough, so be ready for them. And then there was a very runnable section from about 43 through 100K. It was kind of slightly uphill, but it's kind of a gravel road, mix of road and gravel road, and not super technical. So I wanted some legs there. So I really went conservative in the night, in the first 40, 50 miles, and then started, I started gaining on guys, and especially through aid stations. I passed quite a few people in aid stations. But my plan was the last 50K go hard and save it for the last 50K. And in hindsight, I still had some legs at the end. I wish I would have gone, it's 60K to go or something, another 10K of hard. I think I could have probably handled, and I might have caught second. I was only five minutes behind him. So I almost reeled him in. But hindsight's 20/20. So.
Did you and Gary work together early on? Were you guys kind of teaming up at any point, or were you just running your own races? We ran together for quite a while. I went out a little faster than he did. He even went out more conservative than I did, and then he caught back up to me on a road section, and we ran for a whole section from aid station to aid station together, just chatting and chilling and catching up, and then we got in that group of guys, and he kind of took off with those guys, and I let him go. It was going right into about dark, because that race starts at 1 p.m. So it got dark about 5:30 or 6, and I let those guys go and just relaxed. And come to find out, Gary had some problems. He's got a new baby. I can't even believe he went to 100. So he's going on sleep deprivation plus traveling all the way to Japan. He ended up having to take a nap at right after he left me. I think the next aid station he crashed out after the Tenchi Mountains. So at 43, I think he came out of those. They were pretty tough. They got so much rain. They got 2 inches of rain right before the race. And the Tenchi are on the west side of Fuji, and a lot of clay in the dirt. And so they were just a grease pit, super steep. So the downhills were like grabbing trees on the way by. Wow. Trying to slow yourself down. I went down quite a few times, just, baseball slides while you're trying to stay upright on that kind of stuff. But kind of looking at the course profile of UTMF, it's not all this the entire duration. It's not like a UTMB or something where you're either going up or you're going down. There seems to be road sections where you can open up your stride a little bit. Did that come to your benefit? Did you have to pace yourself differently for different sections? Did you do that sort of course recon, or was it just the mindset of get to mile 70 and rip the last 50K? Well, that was pretty much it. I kind of feel like if you go 30 seconds a mile too fast in the first half, you lose it in 2 or 3 minutes a mile in the second half. Got it. And I feel like if you just pace yourself right in the first half, you have tons of legs in the second half. If you're willing to go to the pain cave a little bit, you have legs. You're not gonna, if you've trained well and you've prepared well with lots of ups and downs and beat up your quads on downhills before in training, then you should be okay on that kind of a race. If you have some experience and you have a lot of years of base, you should be able to race the last 50K pretty hard. And I think that race, I did try to run the flatter sections harder. A little harder, just concentrating on turnover. But I think, that it goes through 10 villages. So there's a lot of 3 to 10K kind of rolly road / double track sections. Like you'll come out of the mountains off trail, and every aid station is in a village. So you come down maybe some trail into double track, into a pavement, into town, through town, out, go through the aid station, out of town, and weaving in and out of town, and then back up onto trail and up over another ridge line before you drop into the next aid station. So that's kind of the whole race. They did have to cut out a couple sections this year because of rain. Right. But it still was, I think our times were even slower than in the past, still, because the conditions were so muddy. There was a lot of sections that were roped with knots tied in ropes, and you have to grab trees and roots and rocks, and you're stepping up to stuff this high up, on rooted out sections on some really gnarly tops of some of the summits. Wow. It's pretty technical. I have to say, if I was a little scared of heights and exposure, there's a few spots where you'd be like, whoa. Luckily I'm not, so
that didn't really bother me, but I did have that thought. I was like, there are some sketchy sections in in the course, and they're not giant sections, but they're definitely, the tops of some of the summits are pretty exposed, and you definitely have, are doing some like class 3 scrambling, and you have to use your hands.
That's good to know. I mean, this is definitely something that I've been wanting to add UTMF to the list for the last couple of years, and that's good to know going into it. I never would have assumed that there's any sort of exposure or anything like that. So the last 50K, you're feeling fairly solid, and you decide to push it. What's going through your mind at this point? I think you were hovering, correct me if I'm wrong, you were hovering in the low teens, if not into sub 10 at this point, position-wise for males. Was your mind just tick off as each person individually, or I'm going for podium, or I'm going for the win?
I wanted podium for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the ultimate goal, podium, anywhere on the podium. Well, anytime you race, you want to win, but, or for me, I do, but in 100, I don't worry about so much in a 50K or 50 milers. Tons of guys with better leg speed than me at 44, but 100 milers different. And so for me, it was podium for sure. That was the goal. And when I started kind of pushing it, I just started picking guys off, and I think I came into somewhere around in the 70s, and about 7th into an aid station, but 5th and 6th were still there. And I left in 6th, following 5th, passed him about 100 meters out, and that's when I got into 5th. And then I caught 4th in between to the next aid station, and that's when I caught 4th. That's when I was like, okay, I'm definitely going to go for the podium. And I knew Sandre was, running well, but I knew he's fading a little bit, I heard.
Yeah.
So, and I was feeling super strong. And I had a little bit of like fire after having my first DNF at UTMB. So I was definitely like hunting. And I can definitely focus, in the last 30 or 40 miles of 100. I'm very good at pushing. So
you managed to crank out some of the fastest last few miles. You managed to push up into 3rd place overall, which is where you finished. You finished podium. Absolutely incredible performance at UTMF.
Thanks.
Were you super stoked on this, especially coming off of UTMB with a busted ankle? Because that's a pretty damn incredible performance.
Yeah, I was super stoked. I mean, to get on the podium there is like, any of those big races with big fields like that.
Yeah.
Podium's just almost as good as winning. Not quite as good as winning, but getting 2nd or 3rd is pretty awesome. And it's different that in those kind of races, podium's a pretty big deal. Mm-hmm. So I was super stoked. There are some, just put up this week, I think on Facebook, there are some videos of the finish line, and you can see how stoked I am on video if you go search it on Facebook. But some Japanese guy put up some stuff. I was definitely pretty elated, I have to say.
There's big celebration at UTMB. How did UTMF compare to that, and how does it compare to local races or to the races in the US? Do you find yourself wanting to go back international because the trail running scene is different?
Well, UTMB is like a whole nother deal. I mean, UTMB is so big. Yeah. Anytime, I kind of feel like anytime the Euros have an excuse to get wine and cheese and bread and go hike way up on a mountain all night and get wasted and yell at people with cowbells, they're all up for it. So ultra running's a natural, 100 milers are a natural thing for them to get behind.
Right.
It's huge. It's so big. It makes you, after going to UTMB, it made me want to come back and race well there. After, kind of a bummer DNF, but UTMF is a little different. I mean, it's a newer race, and the Japanese people are definitely more reserved. Mm-hmm. So they're not crazy like the Euros are. They're not in your face with a cowbell the size of their head, yelling, "Allez, allez!" But they are out there. They're clapping and cheering, and they're out there in the droves, even some people at night. So, and there are plenty of people at the finish line. So it was really cool, to see that. And just to experience Japanese culture. They're very humble and helpful, and they think about others all the time. It's pretty cool. It's a lot different than our egocentric America. But, and it's definitely like, I think it really helps these races that, UTMB and UTMF. One of the things I think that makes them really cool and makes them more spectator friendly, makes them more TV friendly, is that they're starting these races in the afternoon or evening. So the front runners are finishing at kind of prime time, somewhere between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. When everyone's out in the town and everyone's there. That's a big reason why it's such a big deal, I think. And they have a lot of TVs on. We're getting more TV, cameras on some of the bigger races in the U.S. But I think if we started them based on that, like trying to think how can we make these more spectator friendly, I think that's one thing to change start times, and so you get the finish times at different times. I don't know. I think that's one thing that's really different about Euro and international races and UTMF especially.
Do you like that sort of publicized version of things, or would you like to see the U.S. scene go that route where things get a little bit more attention, I guess mainstream attention?
Well, I think anytime that you can get some more mainstream attention, if you can change, get one person running out of that, if they view it and say, wow, I can go run 3 miles a day, and lose 15 pounds, then that's a good thing. That's good for the public. That's good for America. I don't know. I mean, I came from like the days of like it being a cult sport and hardly anyone there. And, I finished in one of several hundreds that were, it was my wife and my crew, and that was it and the race director. No one there to greet you. You're kind of like, woo, I just won this 100. Yeah. Hey, hi. Same people I've seen all day. Okay, now eat and go to bed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's definitely more fun to finish with a bunch of people to slap hands and little kids to like, slap their hands as you run by. I mean, anytime anytime you can bring it to the masses and something that's healthy and that could, make, 10% of the people viewing it change their habits a little bit to make them healthier, I'm up for it, So.
We have a great question here from Ultrarunner Pete from Twitter. Let's bring that up. There we go. Jeff, what 100-mile course do you think is the toughest that you've run? And which has been the most fun or most scenic? I'm sure 2,200-mile finishes. I'm sure that there's something in there that's really challenged you.
Well, I think probably toughest course I've ever been on. There's kind of three I throw out there, but Hard Rock's tough. I mean, that one's a tough course just because you have altitude and you have some very steep at altitude race, terrain. Ultra Fjords probably tops the list just because it was like the perfect storm. They had a ton of rain, unseasonable rain right before the race. It was really gnarly. It was very remote and wild. And you felt that. I think that was probably the toughest course, Ultra Fjord, I'd have to say. Tougher than, even though it doesn't have as much climbing as Hard Rock, it just was mentally really tough because the conditions, it rained for 10 hours of the race, tons of river crossings where you're just soaking wet and cold. So right when you dry out or you have to go through another river, those two are probably, I'd say those are the top two. Wasatch's a pretty tough course, but I don't know. That's probably Ultra Fjord. I'd say is probably the toughest. Definitely the toughest.
And is there a course that you find yourself wanting to go back to, or one that maybe you've added to your list as something that you'd really?
Bighorn's probably my number one course. I've gone to that one 4 times, more than any other 100. Hard Rock's beautiful, but it's super hard to get into. So you can't really like bank on getting in that race. So if you get it, you do. But it's such a tough course and such a tough race. Bighorn's a great one because you top out at 9,000 feet, lowest point's like 4,000 feet. So it's it's a manageable race to go into. It's beautiful. It's kind of a small town feel still. It's the middle of nowhere for the U.S. You know, there's not very much population up there. There's definitely more wildlife than there are people. So you definitely, there's wildness to that course. You know, there's moose and bear and cougars and snakes and marmots. I've hurdled marmots there, throwing a rock at a moose. I've had a lot of wildlife encounters in hundreds for sure.
Ever been stalked by a cougar?
I've had a standoff with a cougar.
That's pretty bad.
In San Diego 100 in 2013.
The one you won. You won that one, right?
Yeah. The second time I was there, I had a standoff at about maybe 4 or 5 miles from the finish line. There's a meadow, and you're kind of traversing this meadow, and you're in the trees and tall grass, and something jumped down off a big old rock, and I caught it kind of in peripheral of my headlamp. And luckily, I mean, I don't normally have a pacer, but, you know, I've had 3 pacers in 2200s, and that was one where I had Jesse Haynes had jumped in with me the last 20 miles. That was right before he got in the top 10 at Western States, his first 100 that year. And he just wanted to see what night running was like and jump in with me. And it's the first time I'd ever met him. And so we had a good time, and we became, you know, strong buds after that, but especially after facing a cougar. But we had a good 30, 40 meters away, and it jumped down towards us and was just standing there looking at us, and we were yelling, and we kind of walked sideways, and then finally started running. And well, I said, "Keep your eye on it, Jesse. I'm running." and so we basically would run 40, 50 meters and then both turn around with our headlamps, make sure it wasn't stalking us. But that was a good little scare. And I've seen a cougar one other time in 100 in the middle of the night when I was Zion 100 last year. But it was 70, 80 meters away, and it wasn't really interested in me. I mean, it kind of followed me a little bit, but I was kind of in a good spot. I was on a gravel road coming off a mesa, and it quickly went around a corner and dropped into a cliff face. So the only way it could have followed me was follow me on the gravel road, and I just would run, 50 meters as hard as I could, turn around, look back, make sure no glowing eyes are following me, and then keep running.
Yeah, you don't have to outrun the cougar. You just have to outrun the slowest person that you're with. And if that's Jesse, then sorry, Jesse, a local SoCal guy, really, really awesome dude. Well, Jeff, we're kind of approaching the end of the regular Ginger Runner show. I have to thank you, one, for coming on. You're a total legend, a total beast. It's awesome to have you on and kind of pick your brain a little bit. I know that there's so much more that I could talk to you about and ask you questions about. Congratulations on UTMF. 3rd place there.
Thanks.
After rolling your ankle at UTMB 4 weeks before is nuts. And the day after a typhoon and through some pretty inclement weather as well, which is it's astounding. So really amazing performance. I got to get you back on the show at some point because, again, there's just so much to talk about. So I would love to get you back on. Remind people who are watching live where they could possibly find you on social media, because I love to have live viewers go follow you and interact with you and stuff like that. So where can they find you?
Yeah, GoBroncoBilly.com is blog, and Twitter, Instagram, all is at GoBroncoBilly. And yeah, that's just remember Go Bronco Billy, and you can find it.
Where did that come from? Same with Giddy Up. Where did all that start?
Well, Giddy Up came from a buddy I used to climb with in Denver in the 90s, and he used to say it all the time. He's from Wyoming, and he'd always say Giddy Up, so we'd always say it all the time when we were climbing together. We'd be like, if you didn't want to do something really hard, he'd be like, Giddy Up. So that kind of stuck, that term. And then when I first started running ultras, a buddy of mine, a local guy, Jason, and buddy of mine, Jason, that he's of Norse descent, and so I used to always call him Berserker. And since I grew up on a farm in Missouri and kind of had a hillbilly background, he started calling me Bronco Billy, and I was looking for a blog in 2004, and I couldn't find broncobilly.com wasn't available, so I put since I'm in design and marketing, I put an action word in front of it, so Go Bronco Billy. That's how it came about, and who knew? I mean, I started a blog just to let my family in the Midwest be able to see these crazy things I was doing and see photos and race reports. And then who knew that social media was going to take off?
Who knew? And who knew that you would be doing a live podcast video stream here on a Monday night during Monday Night Football, during the Canadian election, drinking beer. And I forgot to mention that I was drinking Green Flash Hop Head Red tonight, which is it's a really good double red India Pale Ale if you haven't given it a shot. Nice. Were you partaking in anything tonight, Jeff? I
am. I'm drinking mate.
Nice.
See I got a Bombilla in my mate glass.
Yeah.
Yep. After going to Patagonia a few times, I was into mate before I went to Patagonia, and it kind of solidified my love of mate. So that's my afternoon coffee in the morning, one cup of coffee in the morning, and then I usually have some mate in the afternoon. And, you know, it's a weak version right now. This is about my 10th fill. You just keep filling it the way the Chileans do it. They keep filling. I got to drink, I should say this real quick. I got to drink mate with actual gauchos when I was in Patagonia for Mile, that film, which was a really cool experience. And they taught me how to drink proper mate in the right way. And you use a bombilla, you fill it up with hot water, and you keep filling hot water on top of the grains that are already in it. And you never move the straw because that's how you get stuff in your mouth. And then you just keep filling it with hot water. So I keep another thing of hot water. And keep pouring it in there and sipping on it.
We're learning tons on tonight's episode. That's a great way to drink mate. And with every new guest on the show, Jeff, I have a series of quick questions I like to ask them in a little segment we call Quickie Question Quiz, where I just rapid fire questions to you. You just bring up the first answer that comes to mind. You let me know when you're ready, and I'll just get started.
Go for it.
What was your very first race?
First race? Oh, man. Probably in like 7th grade hurdles.
What's your favorite running movie?
Prefontaine.
Trails or road? I think we know this one.
Trails.
Your favorite place to run currently?
Cascades.
Good one. Your bucket list race?
Probably Shinsu 5 Mountain in Japan. I kind of want to go do that 110K. I think that's what it's named. I know it's 5 Mountain, but yeah, it's supposed to be a pretty good race, and I've heard really good things about it. So I'd like to go to that race.
Yeah, someone else has mentioned that one as well to me. It sounds pretty incredible. Guilty pleasure TV show?
I don't really watch. I just watch movies. I don't really watch TV. I haven't had cable since '98.
That's actually like a really common ultra runner answer is no TV.
Well, we were running all the time.
I know. We're always busy doing other things. What's your favorite pre-race meal?
Sushi.
And your favorite post-race indulgence?
Steak.
And your current running kicks?
Number 1, Lone Peak 2.5. Number 2, 1, and number 3, the Torin. All ultras.
Nice. And that is it. You survived. You survived the Quickie Question Quiz. That's it. Thank you so much, everyone who's watching live. Stick around. There's going to be a very brief post show. There's a couple questions here for Jeff that I did not get to in the full show. If you're listening on the podcast version, go check out the YouTube channel and make sure you watch the post show, which is only available to YouTube viewers. That's it for today's show. Again, go follow Jeff on social networks and show him some love. Let him know. Thank you for jumping on to Ginger Runner Live. It was really awesome to have a legend of the sport on the show tonight to talk all about it. And there's still so much more to talk about. Make sure you subscribe to this channel, youtube.com/thegingerrunner, and follow across social networks. It's at The Ginger Runner pretty much everywhere except for Instagram, which is at Ethan Newberry. And get out there, train hard, race harder, and party the hardest. We'll see you guys next week, Monday, 6 p.m. Pacific, always. Otherwise, just stick around because we're going to do the post show here. Thanks very much, everybody. Episode number 88. See you next week. Awesome. 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 So we're in the post show, Jeff. This is kind of where I can get through all the questions that weren't asked during the regular show. Stick around as long as you want. If you need to go, go. We'll probably just do a couple minutes.
That's cool.
Cool. All right. Let's see. We had a couple on Twitter. I want to bring these up. This is from Mobanker42. What was your celebration drink at UTMF?
Celebration drink at UTMF. The first thing I had was a GU recovery drink. But that evening I had steak and a Japanese lager. This
one is from...
Actually, I think I had 3.
Oh, 3. You can't just settle for just one. This one's from Explore Endure. Do you have a go-to hill workout that you do in bulk, or I'm sorry, in build-up to your mountain races? If so, what is it? What is your hill training?
I do have one. I do one where I have about in a mile, a little less than a mile. It's about 700-foot climb on single track, varying grades as it undulates up. So I run that hard as kind of in the middle of a tempo run. So it's like that's one workout. And then another one, I go do just lots of climbing, about 1,500 feet of climbing an hour in a long run every week, somewhere where I can get tons of climbing. Usually Smith Rock State Park is a big one where you can get 700 to 2,000 foot climbs.
Yeah.
They're all steep and rocky and technical. So, you'll get 5,000 to 7,000 feet of climbing in a 20 to 25 miler.
We have another question. We kind of talked a little bit about this when you got it started running. I guess we talked more about when you started ultra running. I also want to know a little bit about the mountain biking history. Were you racing mountain bikes? Was that like a similar part-time job that you would consider ultra running now?
No, I was mainly just, I found mountain biking in '93. I think I bought my first mountain bike way back when, I think the first mountain bikes maybe hit, production mountain bikes hit the US in '86. So it wasn't very long after those first ones were made in Marin that I worked at a bike shop. Luckily, I went to University of Missouri, and there were 3 bike shops in town. And me and some buddies all got into mountain biking at the same time and bought mountain bikes. And I started working at a bike shop. One of my other roommates worked at another opposing bike shop. So all my circle of friends were bikers. I was that guy with like cut-off army fatigues, riding around campus with SBD shoes on, hopping off things, jumping, and we were riding single track any chance we could get after classes. So that's where I kind of got into mountain biking, and I was running too. I've always been a runner on the side, just 20, 30 minute, 40-minute runs here and there, 3 days a week or something, just for fitness, outside of lifting weights. So I lifted weights, mountain biked, and ran a little bit, and then really got started getting into running hard when I moved to Oregon. I moved there in '99, and that's when I kind of really started running on a regular basis. And once I found ultra running, mountain biking kind of took a back seat. I still have a bunch of bikes in my garage. I have a cross bike, a road bike, a 29er mountain bike, a commuter, cruiser. So, quite a few bikes still, but my wife would like me to get rid of some of them for sure.
We have a question in the chat room, and a bunch of people actually mentioned this. On the show, I have in the past done segments called Runner's Rant, which is where a runner can talk about something that's been bugging them lately and get it out into the open and hopefully let go of some of that anger. In many cases, the guests have talked about mountain bikers either not yielding to trail runners or just being completely disrespectful. That's been a very common runner's rant. As someone who has been on both sides of the coin, do you ever run into a situation where a mountain biker's coming down, you go, hey, listen, I'm one of you, but I have the right of way? I mean, have you ever gotten into a discussion with mountain bikers at any point?
Well, we have a little different situation in Central Oregon. We have tons of trails. I mean, we have 700 miles of single track right outside of town. and most of the trails have been built and originally maintained by mountain bikers. So we wouldn't have our Central Oregon Trail Alliance was founded by mountain bikers, and there's been trails being built here since the 70s. So the mountain bike community is super strong here, and most runners have mountain bikes too, that I know. So we all cross train on mountain bikes. Mm-hmm. Everyone's pretty respectful. I mean, occasionally you get the guy who comes blowing down and won't yield, but I have to say, most of the time, just being a biker, it's easier for me to, as a runner, if I see a biker coming, I just jump sideways and a couple of 3 or 4 steps, on the edge of the trail, and as he blows by, is fine with me. So he doesn't have to stop and slow down. I'm usually, I think about what I like as a mountain biker, and if someone steps to the side, I love it and keep rolling. So I usually do that for cyclists, but we don't have that much conflict. We all work, the running community here all gets, most people are members of Central Oregon Trail Alliance, COTA, and we all do trail maintenance and trail building yearly. On an annual basis, everyone's getting out and doing work parties. So we don't really have that kind of thing here. I mean, that doesn't bother me. I've never, only every once in a while you run into someone who's just doesn't think about anyone else but their ride. But that doesn't happen that often in my experience.
That's actually good to hear, and it helps settle the mind a little bit, knowing that there are communities like this. I've ran into the same thing up in Squamish and Vancouver in British Columbia, where the communities are so tightly knit that they all care for each other. I think that's really cool. In Southern California, it seems to be completely different. It must just be something in the water here, but it's a different set of communities.
Well, I think sure. It depends on usage too. Like if you have a ton of people vying for a small piece of land, then you're going to have more conflict. We luckily don't have that issue up here. So
yeah, very true. We have a great question from Craig Randall on Twitter. Let me pull this one up. Jeff, can you explain why you enjoy running for a brand like Patagonia? Is it different than any other sponsors that maybe you've worked with?
Well, I've been with Patagonia the longest. I've been with them on some capacity, sponsorship capacity, since 2003. Their philosophy is different than some running companies or brands that make running stuff. They're more of a lifestyle, like this, trying to protect the places you love. And so for them, they're not as concerned about racing or what I'm doing on my race schedule. So that's, they'd rather me go run an adventure run and bring attention to a conservation issue. And so that's one of the things that, I've been transitioning to the last couple of years is starting to think about, like, what's in my backyard? What do I need? What's something that, I could be helping protect right now or bringing attention to? So, that started with Mile for Mile, and that kind of opened my eyes and made me think, like, well, what am I doing in my backyard besides trail maintenance? Am I doing anything to try to help protect, a space, a wild place? Yeah. That's why I started making me like, that's what's cool about that brand. I mean, they really care about doing things the right way and protecting places, and not as much about results. It's about being an ambassador for the sport, not being a fast guy.
Yeah, and they've always been really vocal with all of their charities and their beliefs and stuff like that. It seems like a really cool, open brand to be sponsored by, as far as global awareness and issue awareness and stuff like that. They've always been really outspoken with all of that stuff. So seems really cool.
Yeah.
I have to thank you again, Jeff, for taking the time out tonight to sit with us and chat with us. And the live audience is super thankful. If you are still watching live, watching the post show, go follow Jeff across social networks. Jeff, just remind people one more time where they can find you.
GoBroncoBilly.com or @GoBroncoBilly on social media.
So do it, friends. Go support Jeff and all of his endurance activities. Do you have races coming up this year? Are you racing anymore in 2015?
If I do, it'll be something small and local or regional. I'm looking at my next year's schedule to see what I want to race. I'm kind of starting to put that together. Not sure yet. I actually was online today looking at some race websites. I like to pick new stuff, just because just tick things off and go to places I haven't been. So I don't know. I'm concentrating on the sub 5 minute mile right now on the track.
You're going to get that. You're going to clobber it.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah. Well, if anything, just fuel yourself with some local beer because you guys have a plethora of it there.
Yes, we do.
Jeff, thank you again for joining us tonight. And thank you all for watching live. Next Monday, 6 p.m. Pacific for another Ginger Runner Live, episode number 89. We're getting up there. We're almost at 100. We're going to have to do something big for 100, I think. Haven't decided yet, but something big. So that is it. Appreciate you guys tuning in and have yourselves a great evening. We'll see you next week.